Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Job. We're now in chapter 2 and in verse 1. And the English says again, but in actual fact, this particular word uh, tells us that there was another day. There was another day, and this is the same day as in chapter 1, verse 6. Chapter 1, verse 6 speaks about that same time when the angels, the sons of God, this is actually B'nai Ha Elohim. It is translated as the angels of God. And these were the same angels that came, and this is Judgment Day. And how do we know that this is judgment? Is because the word here to present themselves literally means to stand, right? To stand. And well, I guess you could say to stand towards or against. To stand against the Lord. This is an expression of judgment, basically, where the angels will come to present cases before God with regards to humans. Now, we're now seeing this a second time. So you need to refresh your memory, go back and watch the video for chapter 1, verses 6 to 12. It is a same event, and it is happening between the angels of God and the Lord. And by the way, the Lord here is Jehovah. And then we are told again, like in verse 6, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. So again, let me just take this out. This is not a name. This is Has Satan, or the Satan, or the adversary. This name Satan is a role. It is an adversary, uh, one who stands opposing, right? Opposing. And so notice this is Hasatan. Uh, and it says, although it says here also, this word is better translated as even Hasatan. And it says, came among them to present himself before the Lord, is to stand against. So as you can see, the English translation has a bit of challenge. To present themselves before, to present himself before, really is to stand in judgment, to stand in accusation against God as cases of the mankind, right? For mankind. So look at chapter 2, verse 1, just like in chapter 1, verse 6, as a heavenly congregation of a time of judgment of mankind. Now, the conversation begins because we have Hasatan amongst them, and God spoke directly to Hasatan. Verse 2, Jehovah said to Hasatan. Now, I put this here so that you understand that this is not a name, right? Hasatan. He says, where have you come from? Now, this kind of question is a real question because it's God speaking to Hasatan, who is actually an angel. Is one of those angels that is accusing mankind. and says, where have you come from? The idea of where have you come from literally means from which part of the land have you been? That would be a better way of understanding. And then Hasatan answered the Lord and said, remember, this is a conversation. Hasatan answered God and said, well, I have been roaming about on earth and walking about on it. This is the same expression as he said in verse 7 in chapter 1. All right. Now, this idea of roaming about, the idea is to go to and fro. That is why the English calls it roaming about, going here and going there on the land. And then he is physically walking, right? Walking in the land. So he is personally going about, checking things out. Now, that is the response from Hasatan. So understand that this is a very friendly conversation between God and Hasatan. And we have spoken about this last week in chapter 1, verse 6 to 12, that Hasatan is actually an angel of God with a specific role. And the role here is to oppose mankind. And it is also with an intention to test free will. So let us get into the argument that Hasatan has uh, against Job. So let's look at verse 3. Now, in verse 3, God now said to Hasatan, basically, what we can surmise from verse 2 is Hasatan is going back and forth looking at it. There's nobody that's truly loyal to God. And God now turns around and says these words: have you considered my servant Job? Now, understand, this is the same expression in chapter 1. Have you, um, have you, this word considered, set in your heart? Have you decided to check this person? That's the way that God is speaking to him. Because it seems like Hasatan is saying, oh, there's nobody who is really good. There's nobody who's really loyal. And God said to Hasatan, well, there is no one like him on this not in the earth, this in the land. A blameless, upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil. Now, this is, again, as I had described to you, is mentioned at least 3 times. It is a description of Job, but I would also suggest to you this is a description of God's expectation of mankind. God wants his creation to be blameless, to be upright, to be God-fearing, to turn away from evil that God don't want them to do. But out of all that, we are now seeing that Job is presented as a key example that in the eyes of God, that Job is really this kind of a person. Now, look at what God continues to say, because this follows from chapter 1. In this part, you find that, and he still holds firm to his integrity. Holds firm literally means he continues to be strong, right? To be strong. He is, how should we say? He is adamant, right? Adamant in his integrity. The English word is integrity. Uh, this word literally means innocence. He is innocent. He is remaining sincere. He is remaining loyal, right? All these are good words. He is adamant, is holding his ground with regards to his uh his stand with God. I think that would be a better way. So what you can see is that we have Job, and then Job has been bombarded with all the tests that Satan said, "Whoa, do you think Job would be loyal to you for nothing?" And so, if you take away his wealth, his livestock, his children, then he will curse you to your face. And Job remains blameless. He remains complete. Now, God says this: He is holding firm to his integrity, although you incited me against him to ruin without cause. Now, the Hebrew actually is quite interesting here. Incited. It is a word here. Incited means to instigate, right? Instigate. By saying things about Job. I said, and you read in chapter 1, from verse 6 to onwards, you find that Hasatan is saying, well, of course, Job is loyal to you. You're protecting him, you're putting a hedge around him. Well, if you remove all this, he will curse you to your face. And God is now saying, you have instigated me against him. You have uh, persuaded me or provoked me. I think that would be a good word. Provoke. Uh, and this idea to ruin him, to destroy him without cause, in vain. This idea is for nothing. This is like how Satan told God, it says, well, does Job remain loyal to you for nothing? That would be the way that in verse 9, I think this is what you would see. This is 1 verse 9. That Satan says, does Job fear God for nothing? And in this case, God says, you have instigated me to destroy him. You have instigated me to swallow him. You have instigated me to uh well to devour him, to test him, and it's all in vain. Now, what does that mean? It means that it has no alternate results. This means that there is no change. No change. Job remains fearful of God. He is blameless, regardless of what happened when his livestock were removed, wealth removed, children removed. In the news that the malak or the messengers came to tell Job, it literally drove him crazy, and yet he did not sin and he remained upright. Now, after this comment by God, Hasatan is not giving up. Hasatan is saying this. Hasatan answered the Lord and said, now Hasatan is not about to give up on testing Job because he believes that people are not like that. They will give up on God when certain challenges are presented in their lives, that they would curse God to his face. And so now he expresses this very Eastern kind of thinking, skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has, he will give for his life. Now, what does this mean? The the challenge here is, what is Hasatan trying to say? Skin for skin. What is skin in this idea? Well, the idea here for skin is the skin of man. I guess in the Eastern thinking, it's your flesh. Uh, and whatever is your flesh, you will protect it. It means that your life is important to be protected. And then you will test him through his skin. Because if he uses his skin, or if you attack his skin, or if you test him on his skin, then he will give up his skin and protect his own life. And that's the idea, right? Skin for skin says, if his skin is attacked, he will protect his life. Now, what does that mean? It means that even when it comes, when it comes to the point when he has to be forced, and that his skin is hurt, that his very flesh is hurt, then he will give up on you. That would be chapter 2, verse 4. So Hasatan is not giving up on the test on Job because he's now saying, well, that was phase one. Now that would be an easier test. This is a more difficult test, and he will give up on you, God. And look at what Hasatan said in chapter 2, verse 5. In verse 5, Hasatan says, the idea here is, however, nevertheless, you must do this. Why don't you? This word is reach out, it is stretch forth your hand now. This is God's hand. Again, Hasatan is saying, God, you have this authority. You stretch out your hand now, and you touch his bone and his flesh. What does it mean to touch his bone and his flesh? This word touch literally means to strike. It also means to, how should we say, to lay his hand, lay his hand. What else can we say? To strike, to lay his hand, to smite. I think that would be a good word. To smite, to apply hurt to his bone and his flesh. Now, in this case, you'll find that bone and flesh are literal here. Bone and flesh is also a very intimate expression. Okay, bone, flesh. If you recall in Genesis chapter 2, when God made the woman from the rib of the man and brought her to the man, and the man says, She is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, bone from my bone, and flesh from my flesh. And so the idea of bone is important because the bone refers to the substance of the self. The idea of the flesh is also in the same aspect. This would be the person. And so you can think of flesh and bones as two different words, but it means the same thing. This refers to something very intimate. This is his very person, his very being. If you do something to him directly, and then Hasatan comes to this conclusion, he will curse you to your face. Again, I ask that you remember this. The word curse here is to bless, but in a negative sense. Just as in chapter 1, the test is to force Job to be so crazy that he had suddenly lost everything, and yet Job did not curse God to his face. So the objective of the test is right here. Do all the tests, God, says Hasatan, and then I will prove to you that Job will curse you to your face. Now, in chapter 1, Job didn't. And now Hasatan is stepping up. So that is outside of him, it's external to him. Well, that would be an easy test. Now we step out the test that if you touch his bone and his flesh, you touch his very person, then people will give up on you. And that would be the end of his loyalty. He will not fear you and he will curse you to your face. That would be how verse 5 would be understood. Now, again, remember, it is stretch out your hand. It is to ask God to, you do it, because God has the authority to commission the test. And so now we read in verse 6. It begins this way. Verse 6, so, and this would be, and then. After that conversation, and then God said to Hasatan. He says, behold, behold is look here. He is in your, well, the word here is power, but the actual word here is hand. He is in your hand. Only, then this word spare his life. The actual translation would be to protect his nephesh. And so we talk of it like, well, his soul, but basically the English is spare his life. But the idea here is the nephesh cannot die because the nephesh gives life. This is the demonstration of life. Of life. And so you can't touch his nephesh. The nephesh must be preserved, protected. But he is in your hand. What about Job is in the hand of Hasatan, bone and flesh? Because that is what he says. Reach out with your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh. Job will curse you to your face. And that's what Hasatan said. And so God commissioned and allowed this. He says, look, Job is in your hand. You can touch his bone and his flesh. Now, this is to do this test on behalf of God. And there is a limitation. The limitation and the boundary is you cannot touch his nephesh. Means that Job cannot die. You can do something to his bone and flesh, his very person, which you say skin for skin. And you can now test him to that extent, but not to the point of death. That would be the expression right here. So spare his life is the English way of saying, but I just hope that you can understand the Hebrew is a bit more expressive, that you're not supposed to touch his nefesh. You're supposed to protect his nefesh, that his nefesh is not supposed to die. So understand the nefesh in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. And God blew into the nostril of Adam, and he became a living nefesh. And so the living nefesh demonstrates that Adam, after he was made with the breath of God, the neshama, that was blown into his nostril, Hasatan cannot stop that from happening. So the living being or the living nefesh or the nefesh haya needs to continue. But Hasatan can touch his bone and flesh, which is basically his person, right? Basically his person. We read now in verse 7, then this word is and then. So you can see that this is in a sequence in the conversation. After God has given his blessing to go and test Job, and how he wanted to test Job was to according to how Hasatan has made an accusation against Job, but God again put a boundary, right? The boundary of the test. You can do all these, but you can't take his life. You must protect his nefesh. And then Hasatan, this is not Satan, it's Hasatan. Hasatan went out from the face of God, which means that God and Hasatan is talking face to face. The next word here is and this word is and then. He, Hasatan, this time round, struck Job. Now, this word strike is to do something to Job with severe boils from the sole of his foot to the top of his head. So, this word strike gives us a picture of the hand going forth and he strikes Job. This is a picture, right? Hand stretch forth. And this is poor Job. So understand that this picture here is very much describing reach out with your hand and touch his bone and his flesh. So that this word struck gives us that imagery. Right? It's an imagery. And then what did he strike and how did he strike? And so we are now told Job is struck with severe boils from the sole of his foot to the top of his head. Now, when we talk about the top of his head, this would be the crown of his head or the scalp of his head. So you would find that the boils would be from the sole of his foot to the scalp or crown of his head. So it's all over him. And these are all boils. Now, this is what the Hasatan had suggested to attack him, the bone and flesh, that he feels it very personally. Now, this is the intent, to feel pain and hurt personally. Why was this important? Because he said skin for skin. In chapter 1, it's everything to do with his property, his livestock, and his children. Now, in chapter 2, Hasatan said, well, of course, if you touch him and make him feel it himself, then he will curse you to your face. This is the intent, to curse you to your face when you touch his bone and flesh. So, severe boils. Now, severe boils would be really, how would you say? In the Hebrew, the word severe boils literally means evil boils, evil outbreak of the skin, evil inflammation of the skin, basically. And so that is important. It will be your ulcers, boils, inflammation. And so it is called evil because it is bad for Job. So good and evil is seen in the eyes of the beholder. And so in the eyes of Job, it is evil. It is painful. It is unbearable. So that we understand what struck Job is so important. It is about stretching out his hand, and this is the consequence of striking. So you can see the imagery of using the hand and to strike him, and all these boils came out from the foot or the sole of his foot to the scalp of his head. In verse 8, then you need to understand the culture of the day. This is, and then what happened when, right, when this thing was striking Job? He is painful all over. And so he took a piece of pottery, and this is normally called a piece of earthenware. Earthenware. A shard. A piece of pottery is a good way of explaining. So if you have a pot, let's say you've got a pot, and you broke it, and then you get these little pieces. This is pot shirt, or a shard, a piece of the pot. And this way, he would scrape himself. The idea of scrape himself is to scratch, because it can be quite itchy as well, while he was sitting in the ashes. Now, the ashes would mean that it is soft, it doesn't hurt his boil because it will be all over. You can imagine him seated down, right? And he is now in a box, probably containing what we will call ashes. This is ashes. And this is usually what happens when you have, well, I guess boils in the old days, right? Boils all over. And that's why he is sitting on the ashes. This is it's what we call a natural soothing place on ashes. and it doesn't hurt the boils when you are seated on it. Now, what is important now is for us to examine what is the consequence of this situation. The test is an incredible test. It is no longer a jerking of the heart, where he thought that he lost all his children and all his livestock disappeared and he was broke or made bankrupt overnight. Now it is a time where he himself is suffering. Now understand, the whole imagery is this: Job did nothing wrong and he is suffering. And so this whole book of Job has caused many people to look at the theme of suffering. And indeed, this is what is happening from a visual perspective. Job really did nothing. Now, that heavenly conversation between Jehovah, God, and Hasatan is very much to prove that Job is truly blameless, upright, God fearing, and shun evil. Test number one in chapter one was cleared, and he passed with flying colors. Chapter 2 is a continuation, and God says, "You have instigated me to test him for no reason." Job is very loyal and God fearing, and Hasatan came about to instigate God. He says, "Of course, skin for skin. If it doesn't hurt himself, he wouldn't curse you to your face. So stretch out your hand and strike him, bone and flesh, and he will curse you to your face." And this is the consequence of that conversation. What is happening now at the place of Job is starting in verse 9. In verse 9, you have this word, then. And obviously, this is and then. And then means after verse 8. After Job is now sitting in the ashes and scratching himself, his wife said to him, his wife would be the woman of his life, and said to him, "Why?" He said, "Do you still hold firm to your integrity?" This is what God has said, that he is innocent, he is sincere, right? He is blameless, he is upright. Why do you hold firm? Why do you maintain so strongly? That would be what this means. Why do you maintain so strongly about your innocence? And then she said something really strange. It says this curse, this is blessed in the negative word, negative sense. It says, "Go and curse Elohim, and then go and die. End your life." Basically, it's to go and die. Go and die. Go kill yourself. Now, understand the principle of the wife. The wife is this: you do good, and then God will bless. Okay? And then Job says, "I am doing good." And it seems that Job is cursed. Something is very wrong here. And so, why do good? Just curse God and die. Because in his wife's mind, very likely, and I'm just giving you a speculation, that she is doing good because she is expecting God to bless. And now that Job is doing good, and Job is suffering, then you had better go and curse God and end your life, because there is no more meaning between you and God. When you maintain innocence between Job and God, and you say you are fearing God and you are upright, why be upright and suffer so badly? You might as well go and die. Why do you want to suffer like that? Now, this is a very important expression. The important expression is that you need to understand that Job is suffering immensely. I'm not even so sure how to express the pain that he's going through, but I'm sure his wife, his Isha, knows. And his Isha and Job actually have two very different character. And so when Hasatan said, I've gone to and fro looking at people who is loyal, well, the wife is not one of them, obviously. And so God never presented the wife as one that you can test. But Job is one you can test. And now Job is facing one greater test than just the Malach of Hasatan. The messenger of Satan is not coming to test Job, it is his own wife. And his own wife is instigating that there is no purpose to living now. You have been loyal to God, and now all of a sudden you've lost everything, and now you're suffering with no reason. It just defies logic. What does that mean? There is no point to serve God. There is no point to do good. There is no point to bless God. You should curse God and just go and die and don't suffer all these things. That is a very incredible test to Job right now. We come to verse 10. And verse 10 tells us, but, well, but is and then. After he hears the woman, he said to her, you are speaking as one of the foolish women speaking. Now, this word foolish, by the way, uh, comes from an adjective. The word foolish here means senseless. You can also say that she is, well, stupid. She is impious. Now, impious means uh, does not know God. You have no sense of God. You are speaking like senseless women. Now, unfortunately, it seems to be a bit gender bias in the statement, but it does appear that women in those days seems to be talking and suggesting all kinds of things that comes out of their lips. And so the lips that says these words depict one of the foolish women. There are senseless women around us, and you are speaking like them. Don't you know God? I think that would be an expression. Don't you know God? Why are you speaking like one who doesn't know God? And look at what Job says. Shall we, the word actually is even, right? Shall we even accept good from God, uh, but not, how should we say, and not accept the evil, uh, and not take, right? And not take the evil. Shall we accept all the good and evil, right? Adversity here is evil, is ra, evil. Remember, good and evil is in the eyes of the beholder. What is good to the eyes of Job? He is saying, well, if God gives us the good, why can't we also take the evil that we see that is not good? Now, is God doing that? Well, in this case, Job cannot explain what is happening, but he is giving a broad statement. If God is our God, then whatever he gives, good or evil, we will have to take it. You can't take one without the other. And in that statement, he is accepting his, well, in a way, he's accepting what is happening to him uh, as part of life, as part of life. He is not saying that God is bad. He's saying that, well, God can give the good and God can give the evil, and we accept the good. Why are we not taking everything? And then the statement or comment is this: despite all this, uh, regardless of this, regardless of what Job is happening, regardless of how he's feeling, regardless of how the wife has told him to curse God and die, look at the comment. The comment is Job did not sin with his lips. And this has a lot to do with you are speaking as one of the foolish women speak. And Job is saying, I am not going to speak like one who does not know God. Job did not sin, did not miss, did not say anything accidentally, accidentally against God. So, in the plight of his suffering, Job knows God much better than the wife. Job looks at the situation, and although he doesn't understand the situation, he is not cursing God because he knows that whatever may befall him, he knows his position before God. If he is God fearing, he has nothing more to fear. The worst that can happen is that he dies, but he is not dead. And so while he lives, he can continue to remain blameless, upright, God fearing, shun evil. Evil means what is wrong before the eyes of God. And hereby declares that Job did not miss with his lips, did not say anything against God, which also tells us he did not curse God to his face. That very objective of the test upon Job, Job had passed. Job remained God fearing. We come to the last three verses. In verse 11, this is, and then Job's three friends heard about all this adversity. The word adversity is evil. Evil that had come upon Job. Why is it evil? He has lost his livestock, he has lost his children, at least that's what is reported and that's what's been seen. And now he has been feeling all the pain in the bone and flesh. The friends came, each one from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite, and they made an appointment together to come to sympathize with him and comfort him. This is a very important aspect that when somebody is in pain, to come together to sympathize. The word sympathize here would be to show compassion. compassion to Job. The second word here is to comfort him, to console him, to make him feel better. So these are what friends are for, right? And usually, what you find is that when you are rich and people can see your wealth, and when you have no more wealth, you have no more friends. But not in the case of Job. And when they looked from a distance and did not recognize him, they raised their voices and wept. Well, what what this meant was that they actually felt his pain. And each of them tore his robe and threw dust over their heads towards the sky. And this is a, well, we say that this is a symbol of mourning. And this is to share grief with Job. It is so sad, really. It was so sad. Now we look at the last verse in verse 13. And then they sat down on the ground with him for 7 days, 7 nights, no one speaking a word, for they saw that his pain was very great. Well, 7 days and 7 nights is a very incredible period. Uh, and this is really to show us that the friends were empathizing, sympathizing, and feeling the pain with Job. Now, in the Hebrew Bible, it continues to chapter 3, verse 1. But we will leave chapter 3 till tomorrow so that we can pick up from where we left off today. And with this, we come to the end of chapter 2.